Welcome to session 4, our final session of Sink into Support. This session today is all about melting. And what that might look like for you today is giving yourself permission to melt. And when I say melt, maybe for you that brings up a feeling or an image of like a popsicle melting or ice cream melting, or just this image used to bring up this visceral sensation of literally letting go, releasing, starting to settle in, sink in, whatever word describes it best for you. And so you might notice that at the beginning of our session, there might not be as much of this sensation of melting. But as we move through the session, you might start to feel an increase little by little, maybe a curiosity to wonder and feel like, what could that feel like? What could that look like for you specifically in this moment today? And so with that, I invite you to find either a seated shape, any seated shape that feels welcome to you, or you might find a child's pose. So whatever allows you to come into this moment in a way that feels supportive to you, your heart, your body, I welcome you to find that now. I'm going to take a child's pose. And as always, you could have a blanket underneath you, whether you are seated and maybe using the blanket to kind of lift your hips a little bit, to take some strain off of your hip flexors, or maybe underneath your knees if you're taking a child's pose. And you can always use a second blanket to wrap over your hips, to wrap over your shoulders, to kind of cocoon yourself in, whatever is going to invite this sense of support, protection, of covering that allows you to feel contained so that you can start to open, unravel. So you can find the shape that suits you in this moment today. If you choose a child's pose, you might decide to rest your forehead on the earth. You might decide to keep your gaze lifted if that feels safer. And to keep your gaze lifted, you might stack your fists on top of one another, maybe resting your chin, maybe resting your forehead. And you can choose wherever you're at to either keep your eyes open or take them closed. As we begin to just arrive in this space, arrive in this moment. Taking a moment to notice where you are, the room that you're in, the mat that you are on, and the shape that you have chosen for yourself. And I invite you to take a scan of your body, just noticing whatever's present for you in this moment. And as you scan through your body, I invite you to bring to mind this reminder that everything in this session is a choice. It is an option. There's never anything that you have to do. There's never anything that is better or good or bad. This whole class is an exercise of choice. And you always have the right to choose, the right to change your mind. And with your next breath, you might shift your mind, your awareness to just your natural breathing. Just watching your breath move in and out for another 2 rounds of breath. Last one. And with your next inhale, if you are ready to move from this shape, if you're in child's pose, you might begin to make your way up into all fours. If you are in a seated shape, you might decide to stay in that seated shape, or you might decide to join me on all fours. And so what we'll be doing is just some spinal movements, just warming up the body, starting to get into some connection. And so you can do this from seated, or you can do it from all fours. So option 1, you might decide to just move organically. And this means there is no agenda. I love moving organically because it allows you to just explore any range of motion that you want. Option 2, if you prefer something more rhythmic, you might allow the spine to drop down toward the floor, or drawing it forward if you're in a seated shape, maybe resting your hands on your legs as you draw the spine forward. And then as you exhale, you might rock the spine back, curling it up towards the ceiling, or if you're seated, hollowing out the chest and the heart. And then you might continue this rhythmic movement, this forward and back. Or option 3 is to create a big circle with your spine, kind of like a barrel roll with your chest as you draw the spine forward, making a big circle, and then send it on back. If you are on all fours and you're taking this shape, it might feel welcome to bend into your elbows. So whatever you decide, I welcome you to take the next 2 or 3 rounds of breath to explore this movement. If you're taking circles, you might change the direction if you're curious what that could feel like. Last breath. Taking any big breaths out that feel welcome, that feel relieving, as we start to find completion here. And so, as we come back to center, back into our tabletop, if you aren't already in tabletop, you might decide to meet us here. And here's option 1, tabletop. You might begin to extend your right leg or your left leg, doesn't matter which one, back behind you. Maybe rolling through your ankle, pointing through your toes, starting to wake up these muscles, feeling them. And then you could bend your right knee, and then taking your knee in a circle, moving into your hip. So here's option 1. You can do this from tabletop. Option 2 is to do it from down dog. And so to come into down dog, you tuck your toes, lift your hips, and then maybe pedal into the feet a little bit, saying hello to your hamstrings. And then you could come up onto your tiptoes if you're in down dog. And then extending one leg up back behind you, bending your knee, and doing the same thing here. Hip circles. So same movement, slightly different orientation. And you might send your hip circles in the opposite direction. And then when you're ready, you could switch sides. Feeling the range of motion in your hip. Noticing that with each rotation, your hip might be popping or stretching or maybe getting warmer. And then when you feel complete, you can come on down. Option to take a child's pose. Just 2 breaths here. And as we take our final breath, I offer you this short poem / affirmation by Cleo Wade, where she says, "And while you hold it all together, who is holding you? And while you hold it all together, who is holding you?" I invite you to allow this class to be something that holds you. Not just in a metaphorical sense, but also in a very physical sense, that these shapes, your breath, this floor, this mat, the wall, maybe even the 4 walls that surround you, that this space, this moment, this time is something that holds you so that you can explore melting, releasing, softening, only as much as it feels safe to do. There's no need to force or rush. You can take your time. And so if you're ready to shift forward, I'll meet you in a seated shape with our legs out in front of us. So with our legs out in front of us, you might even take a moment and move through your ankles. Maybe take a few ankle rolls if that feels welcome. And then with the legs out in front of us, you could pick a side to start on. I'm going to start on my left side. So I'm going to draw my left foot in, and I'm going to allow my right leg to open up to the right. So that our left leg, if you're following the same side as me, you could do the opposite side, but this is just so that I don't get confused. So left leg might be in, right leg could be extended out nice and wide. You could choose to leave your right leg directly right in front of you. It would change the stretch. It'd be more of a hamstring stretch compared to an inner thigh. So you do have that option depending on what your body needs today. So wherever you are, I welcome you to just arrive in this shape, pausing to notice what your body is doing. Maybe noticing your legs. And then you might draw your attention to your tailbone. Perhaps traveling your awareness up your spine, noticing what shape your spine is making. And you might choose to stay right here. There's no need to go any further if this shape is supporting you and you are enjoying the exploration of this. Or if you are ready for the next step or to add on, you could inhale and reach your arms up overhead. You might even allow your spine to reach at the same time. And as you exhale, you could begin to draw your body forward and plant your hands on the floor. I like to take a little bit of a wider stance here. It just feels more stable to me. However, you could also have your hands directly in front of you, maybe even bringing your elbows to the floor. But I'm going to keep a wide stance because it feels kind of lopsided if I don't. But you can choose what works for you. And you can also decide how far you want to walk your hands forward. So you could walk them really far forward, bringing your chest and your forehead down towards the earth. You could also choose to stay lifted, maybe keeping the chest lifted. So you can decide where is that sweet spot that allows you to explore this shape in a way that feels interesting. You can really tune into the sensation. You can feel in your body where this sensation is occurring. So even with your mind's eye, you might travel through your body and notice, where am I feeling the sensation of this shape? And if you're having maybe a hard time pinpointing it, you could even use a hand, one of your hands, to even place on your body and feel okay, where am I feeling this sensation? Is it my inner thigh? Is it the back of my leg? Is it my lower back? Where is this sensation? And then once you feel okay, I think it's around this area, you could even pause there, maybe even just resting your hand in that area. And just breathe for the next 3 breaths. Whether it be with your hand in that area, or maybe settling into the floor. 2 more breaths. And after your second breath, you could choose to stay here longer, or if you're ready, you might begin to press yourself up and away from the floor and right back to center. And before we rush on, we'll just have an opportunity for a pause. And just hanging out here for a second. And we have an opportunity to take a twist. And I want you to choose which way you want to twist. So you could either, and I'll walk us through it, but just to give you a heads up, you can either twist toward your extended leg, or you can twist toward your bent leg. And you might even try both and see which one you like best. So when you're ready, you could inhale and reach your arms up overhead. Maybe your spine follows. And then as you exhale, you could choose to twist in either direction. You might even choose one and feel, how does it feel to twist in this direction? And then you could always switch sides and notice the difference. And then if you prefer one, you might even stick with that one as we take another 2 or 3 breaths. Starting to find completion here. And with your next inhale, you might unravel, coming back to center, and just pausing for a second again, observing any effect. And for our next shape, it might be helpful to have a blanket nearby. And so from the shape that we're in, I'm just going to move my blanket out from underneath me. You can have your blanket folded. And I'm going to start right here. And so coming back into the shape that we were just in, this blanket, if you want to use it, could be on, well, we're going to fold back our extended leg. And then notice first, before we even grab the blanket actually, so we'll just pause for a second. The leg that was originally bent can stay in that shape. Your leg that is outstretched, you can bend your knee and allow your foot to travel right back behind you. So that if you kind of look down, it's kind of like you're making like a weird Z pattern, give or take. And then notice if in your hip, the leg that is bent backwards, if you're feeling like some pinching, some tingling, if you're like, whoa, this feels really intense, you can take your blanket and bring it to the hip towards the leg that is in front of you. So for me, my left leg is in front of me, so I'm going to take my blanket and I'm going to slide it underneath my left hip, not my right, just my left. And notice, what does that do for your body? Does it create a bit more space? And if you need more than one blanket, you can just stack a second blanket right on top. So you can go ahead and set up as needed, supporting your body. And also, if you feel any shooting pain, searing pain, that's your body communicating a request to ease off a little bit. So you can do what you need to do to support your body. And then here, from this shape, once you feel set up and ready, you can take a moment to just feel the leg that is bent backwards. So in my case, my right leg. You could be feeling some interesting sensations in your hip, and that's because this is a very big internal rotation that we don't often take in our daily lives. So you might just pause for a second, just noticing and taking in that sensation. And a reminder that if we are ever in a shape longer than what your body wants to be there, you can leave at any time, no permission needed other than your own. So if you'd like, you could just hang out here and just enjoy exploring whatever sensation you're feeling at this center point. If you'd like to add on, you could inhale and reach your arms up overhead. And then as you exhale, option to take your right hand, so whichever leg is back, that same side, and planted on the floor. For me, I'm a little bit closer to my body. You could reach outside of your leg, but that might feel like a bigger stretch. So you choose. I like to have it a little bit closer to my body. And then with your right hand planted on the floor, you could reach on over with your left, your top arm. And then here, instead of constantly like pulling and reaching and striving, I invite you to just allow your top elbow to bend and your hand to just grow slack. And maybe even turn your gaze down toward the floor. Just rest into this shape. So yes, we are still supporting ourselves with our posted hand, but there's also an action of melting. The floor is holding us up, and we can let go a little bit if it feels safe. For one more breath. When you're ready, you could inhale, reach on up, press away from the floor. And exhale, let the arms go. You might even use your hand to scoop up underneath your back leg and draw it forward, removing the blanket from underneath you if you have it. An option to extend your leg out, maybe take your hands back behind you, stretch through your legs. That was a really big stretch that we just did. And if it feels welcome, you might even plant your feet really wide and rest your hands back behind you on the floor. And then allow your knees to fall in to one side and then the other. And if you choose to take this shape, this windshield wipering shape, you might notice the difference between your right hip and your left hip. And just notice, what is that difference? Okay. And then we'll prepare to take the other side. And so, this time, you could extend your opposite leg. So for me, my left leg is going to be extended, and my right leg comes in. And we can return to our pause. Giving the body a moment to arrive. And again, you could choose to stay right here. This is a good place to be. If you would like to add on, you could inhale and reach all the way up with your torso and your arms. And as you exhale, you might start to lean forward, bringing your hands to the floor and coming to a place that feels right to you. And it might be different than what you did on the previous side. However you have come into this shape, wherever you are with your body, this is your invitation to soften, if that feels welcome. You might even pose it as a question to your body. What would it feel like to soften here? What could that feel like inside of my body? And I welcome you to be here for the next 2 to 3 rounds of breath. And as you soften, if you are asking that question, if you are going on that exploration, you might notice that you are able to soften because there's something beneath you holding you up. You don't have to hold yourself up completely. Yes, there is some muscle activation going on, but It's a different kind of muscle activation. It's from a place of receiving rather than from a place of forcing or striving. And so as we complete those 3 rounds of breath here, if you're ready to find your way up, you could start to press away from the floor and slowly come back to center. And then deciding which way you would like to take your twist, if you want to take the twist. And if you do, you might inhale and reach on up. And as you exhale, you could twist your shoulders over to the side that you'd like to twist to, bringing one hand to the floor back behind you and one hand to whichever leg you've decided. There's no right or wrong choice here. And wherever you end up, I welcome you to bring some awareness into your spine. Just feeling the twist. For one more complete round of breath. And after your exhale, you might breathe in and unravel. Feeling the release of your spine as you let go of the twist and come back to center. Noticing the rebounding action and how that feels in your body. And we'll take the internal hip rotation on this next side. So again, whichever leg is outstretched is the leg that you can bend and fold back. Now, again, have your blanket handy because this could feel really intense. So, your blanket could be on the side where your foot is in front of you. So for me, that's my right leg. So my blanket is on my right side. And you could lift up your right hip or whichever hip is for your front leg and sit on your blanket or maybe 2 blankets and adjust your body as needed. So one hip might feel much more intense in sensation than the other hip, or maybe there is not really a noticeable difference, but it is very often that we favor one side. So if you're having like a bigger sensation on this hip compared to the previous hip, or maybe less compared to the previous hip, that's just totally normal. It's not that we use, the 2 sides of our body the same way. So just letting you know that if you're feeling that way, it's totally to be expected. So taking a moment to feel whatever's present. And if you want to stay right here at center, you can. And if you want to melt with me, then you can do that as well. And so if you're wanting to melt to the side, you could inhale and reach on up. And then as you exhale, taking your hand down to the floor towards the leg that is back. Planting your hand or your fingertips. And then you might reach on over with your top arm. And then soften, allowing your top elbow to just soften, bend, allowing the hand to completely let go and relax. And we'll just be here for another 1 or 2 breaths. However, you always can end the pose whenever you want. And when you're ready, you could inhale and press up and away. And exhale, let it go. Maybe you use your hand to scoop up underneath your back leg and help your leg around. Ooh, it might feel kind of creaky. I know mine does. And so if you want to stretch your legs out, you can. Taking any movement that feels relieving here. You might even wiggle your legs from side to side, maybe even giving the legs a little shake. And then we'll just take another pause, maybe coming into a seated shape here, any seated shape that feels welcome. For the next 2 breaths, can you notice the floor beneath your body? And after your second breath, you might join me in sitting in a cross-legged shape. You might allow your spine to melt forward. Taking one full breath here in this melting position. And then with your next inhale, leading with the back of your head, you might begin to start to lengthen through the spine, through the neck, through the back of the head. And then maybe even reaching your arms up overhead. And then as you exhale, option to begin reaching forward, walking your hands forward, and stopping in the place where you can feel the sensation of this shape in your body. Option to keep your hands on the floor, maybe posting here. A second option is bring your elbows to the floor. A third option is to stack your fists on the floor right in front of you, maybe resting your forehead. Or you could always grab a block and rest your forehead on the block here. Noticing that there's 3 different levels to the block. If one is too short, you could always lengthen the block up. And I invite you to be here for the next 4 rounds of breath. As you hold it all together, who is holding you? This class, this session, this moment right now, this is your container, your mat, the room that you're in. This is your container. You're safe, or maybe safer, if not totally safe. Safer container that holds you, holds the potential for you to maybe release just a little bit. It doesn't have to be all the way. It can be just a little bit. A little reprieve. And so as we finish up our breath here, if you'd like to stay longer, you can. If you're ready to press yourself up, you can. And I'll meet you back at center whenever you get here. And then looking down at your legs, you can notice that one leg is in front of the other. And so you might take your hand and just place it on the leg that is in front, and then switch the cross of your legs so that now the leg that was in front is now in back. And if you're losing circulation in your legs and you want to kind of stretch out for just a second and then come back into our cross-legged shape with the opposite leg in front, you can take your time, allowing the circulation to move back through your body. And then we'll take up some space here by inhaling and reaching up. And then if you'd like to take the shape on this side, you could begin to draw yourself forward. Feeling on this side, where am I? Because it could be different than the previous side. So you might post your hands. You might bring the elbows down to the earth. Maybe you use a block. Maybe you stack your fists. Or maybe you leave your gaze up. The choice is yours. You can take your time here. There is no rush. And I welcome you to be here for 4 more rounds of breath. Perhaps scanning through the body and noticing if there's any muscles that are clenching or working, holding on. And maybe ask those muscles if it would be okay to release, to soften. Maybe just 50%, maybe just 10%. Last breath here. And if you feel complete here, you might begin to lift your head, walk your hands back, come back to center. And taking one full breath at your own pace. And then I invite you to move to the wall, and there will be an opportunity to find a reclined pigeon pose at the wall. So if you want, you can move your mat. You don't have to, but if you want a little bit of cushion, if the floor is hard, then you could do that. And you could always lay a blanket out to be extra comfy, because that's just nice. Okay, so normally when we come to the wall, we get really up close to it and we send the legs up the wall. And this time it's going to be a little bit more spacious. So our knees are actually going to be our measuring stick. So we'll come and lay on the floor, and then we'll plant our feet on the wall. And it doesn't have to be exact, but somewhere around a 90-degree angle, give or take. So you could plant your feet on the wall and notice that your hips are somewhere underneath your knees. And again, perfection is not the goal because it doesn't exist, but this is just to give you a measuring stick range. So then once you find your way there, then you might send your legs up the wall and just rest your heels. And I'm going to start on my right side. You can start on either side, but what you could do is take your right foot and cross it underneath your knee. So if your ankle is directly on your kneecap, that could cause injury and some pain. And so I would encourage you to allow your ankle to fall just below your knee. And then you could start to bend into your left knee and plant your left foot on the wall. And notice here that you control how much of a stretch that you feel. So if this is having your left leg elongated and just having your ankle over your left leg, if this is a stretch and you're already feeling sensation and you decide that this is plenty for you today, you could absolutely stay here. If you're curious about feeling a little bit more sensation, you might start to bend your left knee and bring your left foot to the wall. And then you could continue to control the amount that you feel from there. The only way you will know where your stopping point is, where your body wants to be, is if we feel and pay attention. I welcome you to be here in this reclined pigeon pose for the next 4 or 5 rounds of breath. If it feels like your right leg, your right knee wants to fall in, and if it helps, you could take your right hand and just kind of brace it on your right knee so that your right hip can soften. And then here, feeling your back on the floor, feeling your foot on the wall. The literal support around you, holding you up. Last breath here. You can always choose to stay here longer. And if you are complete, you could lengthen your left leg back up the wall and then uncross your right leg and allow it to stretch out and rest on the wall as well. And then maybe switching sides, your left ankle could cross over your right leg just below the knee. And then if you want to, you could bend your right knee, plant your right foot on the wall. You might decide to take your left hand and gently press it into your left knee. And we'll explore this shape for the next 5 breaths. Last breath here. And whenever you're ready to release, you could extend your right leg back up the wall and rest your left leg up alongside it. We'll be here for a very short resting period. If you'd like to move away from the wall, you can. If you'd like to stay here, you can. If having your legs up the wall and not being super close to the wall doesn't feel welcome, you could always plant your feet, bending your knees, maybe even taking your feet out a little bit wider and then allowing your knees to fall in toward one another so that your hips don't have to do as much work. Whatever pose that you decide to rest in is welcome. It's celebrated. It's totally your choice. You can choose to stay in a seated shape or maybe lay on your side or your back. Anything goes here. And we'll be here just for the next 2 minutes. And you can always choose to stay longer if that's not enough time. If you'd like to stay in this rest longer, you absolutely can. You can stay here as long as you need to, as long as you want to. And if you are ready to move out of this time of rest, you might begin to pull your knees in toward your chest if you have your feet at the wall, or if you're laying on your back. And just resting for a moment here. And then, if and when you're ready, you could roll over to one side and just pause here in a side-lying shape for one breath. And then you could press yourself up and come into a seated shape. option to bring your hands to heart center. And if you'd like, you could join me for one collective breath. And we'll begin with exhaling our air out and breathing in together. Thank you for joining me for this series. My hope is that you feel safe, connected, and at home in your body. Thank you.